Hello, church. So today is Friday, May 30th. Actually, that is not true. Today is May 29th. But I'm recording this and for our Friday devotional, and we'll see you on Saturday in a different outfit as I pop into church and get ready for some other stuff. So we come into Psalm 74 today, and a little preface and overview. And one of the good things about using Psalms for our devotional times is that it's referring to other pieces of Old Testament history and really shows their significance and importance to the nation. So we'll be sharing some stuff from James Mays, who will talk about it a little more astutely. But just as an overview, there are a couple of major incidents within the Old Testament that deeply impact Israel and the Jewish tradition and faith. The one we're going to be hearing about in the Psalm today is the destruction of the temple. So the temple in Jerusalem actually wound up being destroyed twice. The first was with the exile after the fall to I think it was Assyrians and the Babylonians, and I think it was the Babylonian exile that took the southern kingdom, which included the temple in Jerusalem. So what you're going to hear is a lot of questioning of God's absence. The challenge for us, both as modern readers and then as people coming from a Christian tradition, is gaining an understanding that there was a time period in Israel's history where the presence of God was believed to be in very specific spaces. So it was partly contained in the Ark of the Covenant. That Ark also becomes a part of the temple itself and temple worship. So when we're thinking about God's presence, it's being conceived in a very specific physical and geographic dimension. I can't tell you if there was a broader concept of God's Spirit dwelling everywhere. We clearly have reference to creation in the Old Testament and the Spirit of God blowing over the waters and doing other things, but it becomes this fairly contained aspect. So we'll jump into the psalm. Since we're talking about the destruction of the temple, the other big deal, which I did mention, was the time of exile. And so not only people believing the Spirit of God had left that place, but that the people were taken away from the presence of God, and then ultimately called to return. So, big pieces. New Revised Standard. Psalm 74, a maskil of Asaph. O God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? Remember your congregation which you acquired long ago, which you redeemed to be the tribe of your heritage. Remember Mount Zion, where you came to dwell. Direct your steps to the perpetual ruins. The enemy has destroyed everything in the sanctuary. Your foes have roared within your holy place. They set up their emblems there. At the upper entrance, they hacked the wooden trellis with axes. And then with hatchets and hammers, they smashed all its carved work. They set your sanctuary on fire. They desecrated the dwelling place of your name, bringing it to the ground. They said to themselves, we will utterly subdue them. They burned all the meeting places of God in the land. We do not see our emblems. There is no longer any prophet, and there is no one among us who knows how long, O God, is the foe to scoff? Is the enemy to revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand? Why do you keep your hand in your bosom? So some stuff from James Mays, and he entitles his commentary on Psalm 74 as Remember Your Congregation. Psalm 74 is a corporate prayer for help It was likely composed for performance at services of mourning over the destroyed temple in Jerusalem during the exilic period. Such services appear to have been held recurrently at the ruined sanctuary, whose raising is reflected in verses 3 to 7. The psalm has three sections. The first, 1 to 11, opens and closes with laments over the rejection of God. Petitions for God to remember his congregation and temple are followed by a description of the destruction of the temple and the absence of any communication with God. The second section is a hymnic praise, like a hymn, from verses 12 to 17, based on the confession of God's ancient kingship manifested in deeds of salvation in the world. The deeds are rehearsed in verses 13 to 17. The third section is an insistent series of petitions for God to act to vindicate his name against the taunts and insults of the enemy and to deliver his covenant people from their oppression. Um, Not that you can see it, but in May's commentary in that title, he actually does remember your congregation with an exclamation mark, which indicates an imperative tense. So calling upon God, while we get a lot of commands and imperatives coming from God, calling on God to remember the congregation that has come together, remember his children. All right, a little bit from Peterson. It was and then another side note here. Peterson actually breaks it differently than the NRSV did, just in terms of a paragraph break. So we'll be kind of stopping in the middle of a section that he did, and I'll might have to give that a little more of a look a little bit later. An Asaph Psalm. Reminder from the first book, and part of the second too. So we have Asaph and Korah, Korah, or the Asaphites and the Korahites, as these two different sections of Psalms that is related to kind of the Levitical order. These are priestly orders that continue to identify particular Psalms within those sections. You walked off and left us and never looked back. God, how could you do that? We're your very own sheep. How can you stomp off in anger? Refresh your memory of us. You bought us a long time ago. Your most precious tribe, you paid a good price for us. Your very own Mount Zion, you actually lived there once. Come and visit the site of disaster. See how they've wrecked the sanctuary. While your people were at worship, your enemies barged in, brawling and scrawling graffiti. They set fire to the porch, axes swinging. They chopped up the woodwork, beat down the doors with sledgehammers, then split them into kindling. They burned your holy place to the ground, violated the place of worship. They said to themselves, we'll wipe them all out and burn down all the places of worship. There's not a sign or symbol of God in sight, nor anyone to speak his name. No one who knows what's going on. How long, God, will barbarians blaspheme, enemies curse and get by with it? Why don't you do something? How long are you going to sit there with your hands folded in your lap? Very interesting and challenging dynamic for the modern believer. But having witnessed church fires before, I'm sure a lot of you might have had some close friends or family members who suffer that type of destruction. The desperation that comes along with that, we need to hear. And hopefully maybe even be able to empathize with it and connect with it, especially as we see that happening in the world around us. Alrighty, so we will be on that cheery note. We will be back with you on Saturday, and just a reminder on Southward Pilgrimage at 6 o'clock, and we'll be down there for some worship and hymn singing and ice cream. Have a good one.